I think learning how to complete stress responses, I think is something that we don't normally think about. But if you see like an animal in nature, you may have even experienced this in your life. I know I have. But when you have like a really, really big stress and you start to like shake, that's your body discharging the stress. That's your body moving it through you. But we have to complete all, even the little stress responses, they have to find their completion. And so sometimes that requires movement.
Hello, and welcome back to the How to Take Care of Yourself podcast. It's your friend Veronica, and I am here with another fabulous episode. Today, I am with Kristen Timchak, who is an Ayurvedic Health Counselor, Somatic Stress Release Practitioner, herbalist, and the host of the Nourished Nervous System podcast. She's someone who doesn't just talk about self-care. She lives it. She wrestles with it, and she keeps returning to it again and again. And I think that's what makes this conversation feel so alive and so, well, relatable. We get into what resilience really looks like in a body and a life, how Ayurveda and somatic work can weave together to heal the nervous system, and why manas, the Ayurvedic concept of the mind, is such a useful lens for understanding our stress response. This one's juicy. You're going to walk away with real practical tools for tending your own window of resilience, and maybe even a little shake it out dance break. Hey, before we dive in, make sure that you've subscribed on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube so you don't miss an episode and so you can help me get more amazing guests like Kristen onto this show. All right, let's get into it. Hello, Kristen. I am so glad you are here. How are you?
I am doing well, and I am so happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, the honor is mine. I had the pleasure of being on your podcast recently, and I was so excited when you wanted to do mine as well. So I've told my viewers, my listeners, a little bit about you in the introduction, but I would love for you to tell them who you are in your words.
Yeah, I am Kristen Timchak, and I'm a mother. My job is I'm an Ayurvedic health coach. I am a somatic stress release practitioner. I host a podcast called the Nourished Nervous System podcast, and I'm just kind of obsessed with the nervous system through the lenses of Ayurveda, through the lenses of the somatic work, and just all the ways that we can resource ourselves so that we can thrive in our lives and in the world.
Amazing. What a noble thing. And I love that you started with being a mother. How old are your kids? How many kids do you have?
I have one son. He's 5 years old. And yeah, being a mother has been just the biggest journey of my life so far. But it's really all the ups and downs.
Love that.
Yeah.
Speaking of journeys, how did you get to where you are now?
Gosh, it's always hard to know where to start because I feel like my path has been long and very winding. But I would say, just to plant a seed of where it started, I got into yoga and health probably when I was 19 or 20 years old. And in my 20s, I volunteered and lived at Kripalu Yoga Institute in Western Mass and went on to do yoga teacher training where I got interested in Ayurveda. And so then the Ayurveda really just started to take on a life of its own. And I ended up moving to Western Mass, did the first part of the um, Ayurvedic consultation training. In that process, I had a lot of big life stuff come up. My father passed away. I was 29 years old. And so I took a break, did a bunch of healing, a bunch of other life things, and Ayurveda kept on knocking on my door. So I started working with some friends. They had a small Ayurvedic Panchakarma retreat called Lakshmi's Garden in Western Mass. And I started working for them cooking in the kitchen, putting together herbal formulas for people. And then they trained me in the Ayurvedic bodywork. And through that process of having Ayurveda come into my life again so fully, I decided to go back, finish my Ayurvedic training, which I think is where I originally met you. I think you were one of the assistants in my training. And then I moved to California. I took a road trip to California, ended up staying there. And it happened to be the town that I moved to had an Ayurvedic college, which sounds great, but was actually horrible for someone starting an Ayurvedic career because it was so saturated where I lived. But I did body work and I taught some classes. I worked at a little apothecary, but the Ayurveda as work sort of went to the sidelines for me, and I was doing lots of other things. And then it wasn't until after I had my son. I was 42 when I had my son, and I went through this very hard period where I was just struggling with life. When he was around 2.5 years old, we were still in the pandemic. There was a lot of stress in my life. Being a parent in this day and age in our nuclear families during the pandemic, I was just trying to survive. And so a lot of my self-care practices went by the wayside. A lot of the Ayurveda, a lot of everything just went away. And I found myself in this place of the deep, dark pit of depression, anxiety. I was gaining weight. I had all these symptoms that I thought were just hormonal changes from postpartum. It turned out that I had Hashimoto's, which is a hypothyroid autoimmune disease. And that diagnosis for me was the step back into Ayurveda and self-care. I had a therapist at the time who was a somatic practitioner who also had a background in Ayurveda. And we just created all of these self-care practices for me, incorporating the Ayurvedic work, incorporating yoga nidra, all these things to help to get my system back into balance. And it's been a few years and it hasn't been an easy process, but through that, I've gotten my health back into balance. And it has also just opened up this world of me wanting to step back into Ayurveda as my work, as my dharma, as my practice in the world. So I'm back into offering consultations and I'm combining it with the somatic work that I do because somatics has also been a big part of my life. And so I think they're very similar. It's all about being in your body and situated in the self. And so I see the congruence between these two methodologies, and I'm trying to find the ways to have them meet and just help people be more in themselves. And I'm doing Ayurvedic bodywork again as well, which has been wonderful.
That's amazing. It's so interesting how that can happen in a lifetime where you learn something and then life goes sideways and then you're just trying to cope. And then through, unfortunately, a diagnosis, you were brought home. Well, maybe it's fortunately, I don't know, but you were brought back home to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think something that I think about a lot is that we can learn about self-care, we can know about self-care, but it's actually the daily practicing it that makes a difference. Like I can have all the Ayurvedic knowledge in the world, but if I'm not doing the little things every day, then it doesn't help me at all.
Yeah. Yep. And it's so easy as practitioners to forget that what we know also applies to us.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really funny. We like joke about it all the time. It's like, oh yeah, we need to do the things. They don't
Right?
work unless you do them.
Yeah. Yep. And it's not like just doing it once or doing it for a couple months. It's like you have to do the things consistently, at least most of the time. It doesn't have to be, there can be days off, there can be breaks, but to really have to build that, I think of it as like a net of resource. So I like to think of self-care as not just a rote list. I'm doing this and this and this and this. I like to think that I'm kind of weaving this net of resources so that I'm resourced when those bigger stresses come into my life.
Oh, I really like the way you said that. Absolutely. So you're creating your protection before you need it. It's like insurance, right? Like nobody
Right.
wants to use their insurance, but we all have it. Like car insurance, you have to have it. It's like really good.
Yeah.
What was the biggest takeaway for you when you got your diagnosis and then you started applying these self-care modalities along with your therapist?
I think one of the biggest things was that I needed to slow down and to prioritize rest and sleep. Those were big things for me. I think I've had a pretty non-traditional path in my life. And so it wasn't until I was working with a therapist, I never identified as a type A type of person or a perfectionist or anything like that, because I'm just like, well, I'm I'm just like this little ragamuffin that's just trying to get through get through the world. Working with my therapist, she really showed me the ways that I push too hard, the ways I have that pitta, if you're familiar with Ayurveda, that pitta personality. And so I can push too hard. I can overschedule myself. I can be very optimistic about my energy levels or like what I think I can fit into a certain amount of time. And so I think a big takeaway was slowing down, saying no more, putting less on my plate, and prioritizing like real rest, not just sitting on the couch with my phone scrolling Instagram, but like actual real rest. And that's been huge.
And that comes back to your somatic work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. The somatic work for me, I've always been a physical person and I loved yoga. And I think yoga is a somatic practice. I think anything can be a somatic practice depending on the intention that you give to it. Like yoga can be, I'm just doing this pose and this pose and this pose. Or yoga can be, oh, I'm feeling this pose from the inside. I'm feeling this pose from the inside. And I think that's what makes it somatic, is really being able to turn on that awareness inside our bodies and see and feel things instead of just doing them. And so I have a lot of background in dance and authentic movement and all these types of somatic practices, and really want to find the ways for this to work with this with clients. And so I did this somatic stress release training, which works with the stress response cycle and how to complete the stress response cycle and how to be in our bodies, how to notice in our bodies where there's stagnation, where there's tension, where the prana isn't flowing, and then be able to make the physical adjustments to have everything flow. So there's a lot of overlap between the somatic work and the Ayurvedic work. Like the somatic work would never use the word prana, but it's the same thing.
That's super cool. Can you talk more about that connection between the somatic work and the Ayurvedic work?
Yeah. One of the things that I've been really nerding out on lately is in the somatic work, it's a psychological concept, but it's this concept of they call it the window of tolerance. My teacher, Dr. Scott Lyons, he calls it the window of resilience. He reframed it as the window of resilience. And I like that image more. Like, let's not just tolerate ourselves or our nervous system. Let's like really get resilient. So the window of resilience is basically, we know what a stress response is. We encounter a stressor. There's a cascade of chemical reactions that happen in our body. And we either go into an arousal state, like the sympathetic nervous system state, our typical fight or flee state, or we go into a super hyper parasympathetic state, which would be the freeze state. We get immobilized. And so and these things are all happening all the time. And I think in our society, stress has gotten a bad rap, and we have some idea that we should just be in this calm, regulated state all the time. But actually, what's really the healthy thing is to have that sympathetic arousal and have that parasympathetic de-escalation, and to have it happening all the time, but in levels that we can process and handle. So that's the window of resilience, is that place where you can process your stress, where you still feel grounded, you still are able to make decisions from a non-reactive place, but you have that little bit of sympathetic action, or else you wouldn't have movement. The sympathetic stress response helps us to like move in the world. And the parasympathetic stress response helps us to calm down and slow down. And so when we go out of that window, we can either go into hyper arousal, which is that overwhelm, anxiety, agitation, rage, all those types of really big, intense feelings, or we can go into hypo arousal. If we go down the other direction into that freeze state, into that place of despondency and inertia, inaction, numbness. I don't even know if it's like depression, but just that place where you can't move anymore. And so our ideal is to widen. Everyone's window of resilience is different. The things that are going to bring somebody into hyperarousal are going to be different depending on the person. And I think there is a correlation. There can be a correlation, I think, between our Ayurvedic doshas. Like I think somebody who is a more Vata person, who is maybe more Vata out of balance, their window of resilience is naturally going to be a little bit smaller than somebody who's a Kapha constitution and who is in balance in their Kapha constitution. Because if you think about like the earth and water, there's just naturally a bit more resilience there than the air and space. Air and space can get thrown out of balance more easily. And then to layer just one other concept into this is the idea of the mind. So I think in our Western idea of the mind, we think about our brains, but in Ayurveda, and this was really a light bulb for me. In Ayurveda, the mind is manas, and it doesn't have a specific place in our bodies. And its job is to process information that comes in. And so that information is coming in through all of our senses, through touch, through smell, through taste, through sight, and it's processing. And so it's actually more akin to our Western concept of the nervous system. And so that was a big light bulb for me, because then when we talk about sattva, rajas, and tamas, sattva being that place of calm, that place of clear, it's not just the mind, it's not just our brains that are in that state. It's our whole bodies, it's our nervous system is in that state of openness, of truth, of contentment. And when I layer that over this idea of the window of resilience, I can see that the window of resilience is grounded in sattva, but it has rajas and tamas in healthy balance. So we need that little bit, because sattva has no movement. Sattva is just that clear space. And so we need the rajas to move through our lives. We need the tamas to slow us down, that's parasympathetic state. And so our ideal is to do the things that are going to ground us in this place and try not to get into that hyperactivated rajas place or that hypo activated tamas place. And so that's been just a huge part for me. I think coming from the Ayurvedic perspective and then learning about this, it's just been this huge connection for me of like, oh, right, if I want to increase my window of resilience, part of it is increasing the practices that cultivate sattva in my life. So I just talked a lot, so I'll stop.
No, that was great. I love how you explain that. And I absolutely think you're right. The way you explain it, it makes perfect sense to me. And I think it's really useful for people to hear that, because we don't think about it like that. And to have it in that, I don't want to say simplistic because it's really not, but to have it explained in such clear fashion, it helps people, because people do think, and this is perhaps to the detriment, people think they're not supposed to be stressed ever. And I've talked about it on other podcasts, but there's that whole experiment they did building the big geodesic dome, and it was like a life-size terrarium, and they filled it with all the plants and everything was going well. And then one day all the trees fell over. It's like, why did they fall over? Well, there was no wind to help keep the trees strong and stable. And so of course they're going to fall over, because if we never have any wind, our window of resilience is tiny, because we've never stretched it with any experience or any kind of positive stress. It's like, it's the same with the mind. It's the same with the body, right? If you never use your muscles, they won't have a window of resilience. They won't have a window of tolerance, right? Because I think that's probably why they call it that, because it is kind of like a muscle, and your muscles have a certain tolerance. And so if you never use them, you're incapable of using them when you need them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think from an Ayurvedic perspective and yoga perspective as well, because I think sattva, rajas, and tamas is something that I maybe first learned about when in yogic philosophy. There's this way that we make rajas and tamas. Like when I first learned about it, I was like, oh, rajas and tamas are bad. Like I don't want to rajas and tamas, just sattva. But I think this understanding of, oh, right, we need that little bit of rajas. We need that stress. Do you like to get up in the morning? You need a little rajas. Do you like to go to sleep at night? You need some tamas. Like just embracing. And I think we do the same thing with stress. Stress gets a really bad rap, just like you're saying. Like there's this idea that we shouldn't have any stress, and it's not the stress that's hurting us. I had in my somatic training, there was a definition of stress that was given to us. And I think this is one of the first early definitions of stress, in that it's an adaptation to a stressor. So it's a physiological adaptation. So the actual stress, like you said, we need that in order to become stronger, to grow. And the problem comes in is when the stress is chronic, or when we're not completing the stress response cycles. And so then we have this cortisol and these things that are fine in the short term, but when they're in our bodies for these long terms, that it starts to wreak a little havoc. But stress in itself is not bad. We need stress. Like you said, like without the pressure of the wind, we wouldn't be able to keep our roots in. So yeah.
Like the way you said that, we wouldn't be able to keep our roots in. It's so true. And I think it's funny, as we're talking about it, I'm just thinking about people who, again, back to that idea of like, if you don't use it, you lose it. It's like people have to build their capacity. And it's not that someone's going to go from no capacity to being able to be like a first responder overnight. It's something that really takes time, and being able to complete that stress cycle, like you were saying, like they have to be able to down regulate. If they never get the opportunity to down regulate, then that's where the cascade of hormonal chaos happens, right? And then they end up with something. They end up with something, and that something might be as simple as insomnia. It might be like IBS, but it might be something more complicated. It might be like an actual quote unquote diagnosis. Like we hope people, but I mean, not like insomnia and IBS aren't actual diagnosis, but I feel like they're easily reversible with proper care. Whereas something, I mean, we could even draw a line that some cancers are directly related to this inability to complete the stress cycle and downregulate. Yeah,
Totally. And I think that's also an interesting place where Ayurveda can come in, is that for what each person needs to complete this stress response cycle might be different depending on their constitution. So I think about, for the Pitta person, in order to downregulate, they might need to move first. They might need to get out some energy. I think about the yoga classes for Pitta people when during the Ayurvedic yoga training, and the Pitta classes, you have some strong movement or flow first, and then going into that down regulation, into that flow, where like a Kapha person who tendency is to get stuck in the parasympathetic place, that deep parasympathetic place, they might actually need to regulate. They might need some movement. They might need even a little bit of caffeine. They might need stuff to like get their system really going and moving. And then the Vata person is going to need nourishment and soothing in that container and slowness and rhythm in their lives in order to regulate. So I think Ayurveda works with this so beautifully, because like self-care isn't an across the board thing. There's not one thing that's right for everybody.
No, there's not. And I remember, and you probably heard this in school too, it's like treat Vata like a flower, to like a friend, Kapha like an enemy, which are
yes, totally.
Because sometimes you got to slap Kapha upside the head and get them off the couch. They don't want to go.
Right?
And Pittas, it's like you got to make it think it's their idea. And then Vatas, you just have to, they're delicate and sweet, like an orchid, right? Like the wrong move and they're going to spaz out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting.
It's so true. It's so true. And we can do that for ourselves in our self-care and in our nervous system. Yeah.
Speaking of self-care, what are your non-negotiables nowadays? How are you taking care of yourself?
My non-negotiables are, I would say my biggest one is sleep. I need to sleep. I need to sleep a lot, probably more than what I ever thought. And I have had to make changes in my life in order to achieve that. Like I've had to let go of watching shows before bed, which I really loved to do, in order to get to bed on the time that I want to and have the quality of sleep that I want to. So that's been a huge part of my self-care. I would say another non-negotiable for me is some type of movement in the morning. It doesn't even have to be for long. Sometimes it's just 5 minutes, but I have to have some type of movement in that kapha time of day to get everything moving and flowing. I'm just a better human throughout the day when I do that. And I mean, food, diet has been huge, especially with the autoimmune disease. My diet has really shifted. I used to be the Pitta, I can eat anything, just throw it on the plate and I'll eat it. And now I can't eat gluten and I can't eat dairy and all the different things. So, but just trying to keep my diet seasonal and balanced has been huge. I would say the other piece for me is that feels non-negotiable is meditation. And same with the exercise. I have a 5-year-old and life is busy. I don't always have time to do even a half hour of meditation, but like 5 to 15 minutes, if I can get that in every day, then I just notice a different quality in my mind and in my life. And I've noticed that since I've been doing this. So with the window of resilience, when I went through that really hard period when my son was a toddler, it also was corresponding with like one of the hardest parenting stages of just so much rajas happening all the time in his little life. And I would just get really triggered and I would yell at him and we had mom rage. And I've noticed as I've been really implementing the self-care, I mean, it's been like years now. I still get mad, but I've just noticed how much larger my window of resilience has gotten from these practices, especially the meditation. I feel like I really notice a correlation with that for me.
So for you, it was just like you were talking about earlier, it's like that nervous system connection has to be there or else you can't regulate.
Yes. Yeah. I feel like it helps me stay connected to myself. I think in our world that we live in, we can get really drawn out into our devices and screens and kind of like forget that we're here. And so I think it helps me to bring my energy, my prana, my attention, my focus back into myself and have that check-in with myself every day, which feels important.
Super important. And I just want to say, like, not for nothing, to have a toddler when the pandemic hit and all of that, like, I had never heard the term mom rage before. I don't have kids, so I like it probably hasn't come up. I mean, I have cat rage sometimes because my little Hellions
totally
can
get
be
that.
like insane, but like they're cats, whatever. Like, but I just want to take a second to acknowledge, like, I really have empathy for you around that. That must have been so challenging, and you must have felt so isolated.
Yes. Yeah. And I'll say that's maybe the other piece for me as self-care is like community, which I think is just huge, is just creating connections and feeling a part of something bigger than me. Because it was very isolating. And I think being a parent this day and age is universally a pretty isolating experience unless you have a big family structure. But I think for a lot of us in this current form of things, it's hard in the best of times.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It strikes me that we live in a time when we can be more connected than ever before, and we're all more isolated than ever before. It's this strange paradox of you can pick up a device and contact anyone anywhere on the planet, even in the most remote places, and yet we feel this sense of disconnection. And I think you're a good person to answer this question that just popped into my mind. Do you think that's because we're not getting physical face-to-face connection?
Like that lack of the feeling of disconnection?
Yeah, so we feel isolated. And do you think that's because we're not actually getting as much opportunity in person to exchange the mirror neurons and the whatever chemicals, the hormonal changes that happen when we're like literally together?
Definitely. I definitely think that's related. It's actually one of the reasons when I first started my practice, I was doing mostly online stuff because it was towards the end of the pandemic and had this idea of wanting to have a fully online business. And then I moved across the country and landed here in Maine. And slowly it has evolved that it kind of came into my lap of starting to do the Ayurvedic body work again. And for me, a big part of it was just that what you're talking about is needing to be in physical space with people and not just online. I'm so grateful for the online. It's really amazing to be able to connect with people all over the world, but there is something I think that happens when we're in physical space with each other that's really different.
I agree. And I think I would like to make a movement that next time we record together, because you're not far away from me, we do it in person.
Yes, let's do it.
I love it. I'm
That would
totally
be fun.
down with that.
Me too.
It'd be a blast. So so you're working with people one-on-one for body work. I'm assuming you're also doing some one-on-ones for consultations.
Mm-hmm.
What is your typical advice And I know this is hard because we talk about specificity in Ayurveda. There's hard to talk in generalities, but I'm really curious if, if you had like 5-10 minutes, maybe it's your cocktail speech. So someone comes and talks to you at a cocktail party, like, because we go to so many cocktail parties here in Maine, but someone comes up and there are a lot of cocktail parties there in Bethel. I don't think so. There are zero here. Actually, I've been to one. That I'm lying. There was one. Somebody had an art show and I went and they
Wow.
were drinking cocktails. Not that I drink, but anyway. So like you're at a cocktail party and someone comes up to you and they're like, "Wow, I hear you do this Ayurveda thing." They'll always pronounce it wrong. And then they'll be like, "What advice do you have for a normal person? Like what would you say to someone just starting out taking care of themselves?"
That's a really good question. I would say to start paying attention to what's happening outside. That one of the bases of Ayurveda is that we are nature and that what's happening outside in the world is also happening inside of us because we're not separate from it. So I think one small thing is to just start paying attention. Notice the weather. Notice, is it cold and heavy? Is it wet? Then like what can you do to balance that? Could you bring in some more warmth? Could you drink some hot tea, take a sauna, take a hot shower even? But how do we balance it in the heat of summer when it's so hot, when that pitta is so high and you start to notice anger and frustration coming up? Just like cool it, drink some coconut water, sit under a tree, get in some cold water, but just start to notice what's happening outside of you and how it's affecting your internal world. And there's so many variations that can happen through that. But I think when we're in tune with the seasons, when we start to get in tune with the seasons, I think it makes a huge difference. The same way how you would say for people to eat with the seasons. I think getting also in tune with our emotional, psychological, mind, nervous system landscape with the seasons is important as well.
That's great because then you manage to keep it on that individualistic level because there's some people when that heat of summer shows up, they are like, I have been waiting all year for this moment. Whereas
Exactly.
people like you and me are like, okay, so where's the nearest body of water? And
Yes.
how easy is it to access?
Exactly. Or just like, I mean, and it happens in every season, in every way. I was just talking to a friend recently who's a very Vata person who also moved here from California, and where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so happy to be in this climate. I'm so happy that it's cooler and moister. And she's just like, bring me to the Caribbean, get me out of here. It's, so it is also so individual.
My husband and I go through that a lot. He's Kapha Vata and I'm Pitta, maybe Vata. I don't know. There's some Vata in there for sure. But when we first got up here, it was a little, and he knew, but he was a little like, it's cold. And it's been big this spring, right? Because it feels like the winter is never ending. But he's like, what do you mean it's snow? I mean, he came downstairs in the last snowstorm, like laughing maniacally, where I was like, ooh, do we need to take you to somebody? Like, are
Right?
you okay? Because he was like kind of losing his shit that it snowed again. And I was like, dude, it's awesome. I'm like, gonna go run out and play. And he's like, this is the worst. It's never gonna end. Like,
Totally.
sorry, dude.
I mean, I have questioned it this spring, whether I was like, winter is it's not letting go. Winter just needs to let go. It's time. It's over.
Well, to Mother Nature's credit, we had 2 winters previous to this that just like ended and then it was spring. It felt like April 1st happened or even late March happened and then it was like, oh my God, are daffodils up already? Like, what is
Right.
happening? Whereas this year I'm like, where are they? Although we saw crocuses yesterday. Very exciting. Very exciting. So getting people to tune into the seasons, really feeling into their seasonal correlations, let's call it. Anything else that you give a beginner that's just starting to take on their taking care of journey?
I would say being aware of your relationship with screens. I think screens are something that can really throw our nervous systems out of balance without us even realizing it because we're so inundated in it. So I'm not saying go cold turkey or anything like that, but like just being aware of that relationship. And if there's any places that you can begin to put the phone down for 5 minutes and read a book or do some stretching or just do something else that's actually going to resource you instead of take energy from you.
So building back in rather than depleting.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. And then I'm fascinated with your somatic work. So I'm wondering if you could give our viewers and listeners a little tip or something somatically related that would be a useful takeaway?
Well, I think learning how to complete stress responses, I think is something that we don't normally think about. But if you see like an animal in nature, you may have even experienced this in your life. I know I have. But when you have like a really, really big stress and you start to like shake, that's your body discharging the stress. That's your body moving it through you. But we have to complete all, even the little stress responses, they have to find their completion. And so sometimes that requires movement. And so something that I like to do is if I'm, working at my desk or something, I like to take like a 5 to 30 second somatic pause where I'll just stop what I'm doing. I'll take a moment to tune into my body. I notice anywhere that I'm tight or tense, often my shoulders get all scrunched up or like my posture starts to hunch over. And I just take a moment to like let everything settle back and do any little movements, shake my shoulders, just shake things out a little bit, get a little energy moving in my body, stretch anything that's feeling tight. And it just creates more flow and it helps to release some of the stress responses. Movement is one of the best ways to complete a stress response. So even the littlest bits that you can do through your day, taking those little moments to pause and feel your body can be so helpful. And they can really help to keep, if stress was a cup that's filling up, it helps to take little bits of water off the top of that cup and keep the cup from overflowing.
Love that. And it's such a good reminder because especially, those of us that work at a desk for long periods of time, it's easy to just plow through.
Yes.
And then you go to get up and you're like, oh, I feel like I got hit by a truck. And it's like, no, you just been sitting in the same position for 4 hours. It happens
Right?
to me. And I know it happens to you. You're editing and it's like, next thing you know, you go to stand up. You're like, oh God, what
Yep.
happened? And, people laugh because they're like, aren't you a yoga teacher? I'm like, well, yeah, but yoga teachers forget too.
We're all human. We're all on the
Fact.
path.
Fact. So funny. So a little bit of movement. Maybe everybody does that now. Just even rolling your
Yes.
shoulders forward, up, back, and down. Or do you have a favorite one that you like to do?
I mean, I think that's one of the ones I do is just, yeah, get my shoulders going. And then I like to do a little shake. I like to give my body a little
Shimmy.
shake. I feel like that helps get stuff out. And if this is something I do with my son sometimes, especially if I notice that we're getting into that place of challenge with each other, that's like the kind of power struggle challenge, I'll just put on a song and I'll just grab his hand and we'll just start shaking and we just shake it out. And then like whatever it was usually goes away and we can re-meet each other from a more grounded, regulated place. But just shaking our bodies is so huge and it moves the lymph. It has so many good things for us.
Belly dancers had it right all along.
Right? Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. I belly danced for a long time and I never thought about that connection until right now. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to find like unhappy belly dancers. They're usually pretty happy people. But what I think what you're talking about with you're recalibrating your bodies and your minds in that shaking moment, in that dancing around moment. You're just recalibrating everything. That's amazing. And a great parenting tip.
It's helpful when I can remember it.
I hear you. Well, aren't they all, right? Like we talked about that earlier. Both of us have gone through extensive training and both of us have gone through periods where it was like, I know how to do what? No, I don't. I'm just going to sit on the couch and binge watch some stupid TV and eat popcorn. It's like your body pays for it. And then you remember like, wow, I feel like shit and I can't sleep.
Yep. Exactly.
When was the last time I ate a real meal on schedule?
Right. Yes.
So funny.
Yeah.
Hey, is there anything you wish we had talked about during our time together? And I know you and I could go on for hours and hours and hours. I'm just curious for this session. Is there anything you wish we touched upon? Anything you wish you got to say?
No, I think I feel complete. I thought that was great. Yeah. I feel like we covered a lot of ground.
We did, and we will again. I am sure of it.
Yes. Yes.
So we have a tradition here on the How to Take Care of Yourself podcast where at the end of every interview, I ask 2 questions. One comes from the Delve deck, which are a set of conversation cards that are amazing, especially if you have awkward family gatherings. You can bring these to your family gathering. And I do not work for Delve. I am not an affiliate of Delve. I get no money from them, but they have saved my butt during many an awkward family situation. So I have just grabbed a clump of cards. You can see they're very, very non-threatening, which is good, especially in my family. And I'm going to pick a card at random. This is a great question. So what commercial is so annoying that it made you vow to avoid the advertiser?
Ooh, that's a good question. Gosh, I mean, there's so many, right? I mean, I feel like I think about some of the jingly ones from my youth. There was like, oh gosh, I'm like trying to dig deep here. I feel like I used to get really annoyed by the juicy fruit commercials. I don't know if you remember those. That's like the thing that popped into my head was they were just cheesy and annoying and did not make me want to chew juicy fruit gum. I feel like I haven't seen a commercial in a really long time, to be honest.
I was just having the same thought. I feel like we live in a world now where you can literally curate out all the ads. And so I am happy to pay for a premium service to not have the ads. Just shut up and take my money. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Don't make me
Yeah.
listen to an ad.
Ugh.
Juicy fruit. Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't miss much because juicy fruit gum lasts for exactly 2.3 seconds and then you just have gum in your mouth. Like the flavor is not worth it.
It's gone. Yeah.
It's gone. It's gone. Yeah. We bought a pack a couple years ago just because we saw it in some like little funky store in Wiscasset and we were like, yeah, oh, fun. And then we put it in our mouths and we're like, yeah, it lasts for 2 seconds and then it's gross.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other question we always ask on the show, and it's the final question, is what have you learned from the food that you eat?
That is such a good question. I think I've learned that eating healthy can be so delicious. I think there's, especially having to eat a diet that's restricted with the autoimmune disease and just finding the ways to eat food that loves my body that is also really delicious and satisfying for my senses. So I've learned that balance can be delicious.
That's great. Such a good answer. Well, where can people find you? Where can people work with you?
So I work if you're in the Mid-Coast Maine area, I work in Belfast. I do the Ayurvedic treatments at a place called Still Point, and I see people for consultations there. I also work online doing both Ayurvedic consultations and coaching as well as the somatic work. And I'm working on finding ways to actually combine the Ayurveda and somatic work into a session where we work on some of the lifestyle stuff that we can shift Ayurvedically, but then also working on the stress responses that are wrapped up in that. Like if someone's not sleeping well and wants to work on sleep, there's the things we can do in our physical lives, but there's also the stress around not sleeping that we can go in somatically and try to work on that stress. So I'm doing that online in person. You can find me at www.nourishednervoussystem.com. I'm on Instagram, Nourished Nervous System, and my podcast, which is also the Nourished Nervous System. So
very steady branding. I love that.
Yes.
And we'll link to all of that in the show notes. So if you are interested in working with Kristen, seeing more about what she does and listening to her excellent podcast, highly recommend it. Check it out in the show notes below. And this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. I look forward to doing more.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We can start getting into themes and things. I think people will be really interested in that. And as a matter of fact, if you, the listener viewer, have a topic that you'd like Kristen and I to cover, please reach out, send me a message and let me know, and we will do it. We take direction.
Yes, I would love that. So fun.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Well, thanks for being here, friend.
Thank you, Veronica.
We'll see you next time. Wow, that was such a nourishing conversation. Huge thanks to Kristen for bringing her wisdom, her vulnerability, and her generous spirit to the show. If you want to learn more about her work or experience the magic of combining Ayurveda with somatic practices, check out her website at nourishednervoussystem.com Follow her on Instagram at Nourished Nervous System, and definitely give her podcast, The Nourished Nervous System, a listen. Also, Kristen has generously shared her weekend nervous system reset, which is a simple, beautiful resource to help you restore your energy and come back to your center. You can find the link in the show notes below, and I highly recommend checking it out. If you love this conversation, would you do me a quick favor? Subscribe, leave a review, and then share this episode with a friend who could use a little nervous system support. It helps more than you know. And before we sign off, just a reminder that I love you, and I am absolutely convinced at your capacity to continue crafting a life worth living. Until next time, take sweet care of that precious body and spirit of yours, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.